Hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode in our interview series. Today, we're joined by Darlene Batatian, who is the state geologist and director of the Utah Geological Survey. Darlene and I have crossed paths a few times, over the last few decades, I suppose. We were actually both based in the Salt Lake City area in the early 2000s. She was the county geologist, and I was a minion working for a consulting company, low man on the totem pole. But I didn't know her, but I knew of her name. And then if you fast forward a few decades, once I kind of started this YouTube thing, she was one of the participants that came on my May 2024 field trip to Iceland. And so I got to know Darlene along with some other folks really well. She's a fantastic person. And in the intervening time since I was last with her, she's risen to this new role with the State Geological Survey. So Darlene, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Shawn. I'm excited to be with you today.
Yeah, so we'd like to start these little interviews off, Darlene, with just kind of your background, where you grew up, and then kind of getting into how you became interested in geology. So walk us down that path a little bit.
Yeah, well, like all great things in life, I actually came to geology totally by accident. I grew up in LA. I'm a Pasadena girl. My parents were not super outdoorsy, so we didn't like camp and hike and all that kind of thing. I thought that I was going to be an English lit major. So that's what I applied to when I was applying to schools. But I also graduated early from high school. And in the meantime, I thought, well, I'll just go take some classes at the local junior community college and knock out some of those pesky science requirements.
Right, the gen ed requirements, right?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I'll take a geography class, right? But the geography class was full, so I just went down the list to the next class.
Alphabetically to the next listing in the catalog.
Literally, I was standing, this was in the old days when you had to register at a window, like with a, pencil and a paper. And I was like, geology, yeah, earthquakes, volcanoes, sounds great. Turns out the professor at that class at Pasadena City College was just an incredible professor. And he really lit a spark for me. And almost immediately we were out in the field, wandering around the Santa Clara riverbed, breaking open boulders of metamorphic rocks and going up in the San Gabriel Mountains and looking at, eroding basement rocks, and did a long field trip to Yosemite. And I just loved it. I loved the outdoors adventure of it. I loved the thought process that's involved in geology. I used to do puzzles when I was a little kid, and geology is very much like putting pieces of information together. And I did a backpacking trip with them that summer across the Sierra Nevada. So by the time I went to UC Santa Cruz, I was all in on geology and started taking classes right away and declared my major. And I got super lucky because the summer of my sophomore year, the department was looking for a field tech to join 2 PhD students on a field project in Alaska. This was a really remote project. They were drilling paleomag cores and mapping on some islands in North Bristol Bay. No shelter, no buildings, one long trip, 12 weeks out in the field. We had to pre-plan all of our food and transportation, fly out in a float plane, Zodiac rack, paleomag mag drill. And I was like, well, I'm gonna see if I can get this job, right? And I did. And it was interesting because this was in the very early 1980s. I'm going to date myself here. And some of the guys in the department were like, you really shouldn't go there. Alaska is not the right place for you. It's the wrong place for a woman. They're going to have to send you home.
Were these like professors kind of steering you away, or just like other students?
Other students, guys in my group. And I was like, yeah, you might be right. But if they think I can do this, I think I can do this, and I guess we'll find out. So,
well, what a cool opportunity at a sophomore level too, to have that kind of opportunity, right? Like,
yeah, I was like 19, and I'm, like I said, I'm from LA, and my parents are outdoors people, so I'm like doing this kind of big field tech project. Bye. And it was before the days of cell phones, so there's really no way to like connect with anybody out there. In fact, we had a Zodiac boat to get ourselves around these islands, and we just had this tiny little radio. Like if our motor conked out there, we just like drift out to the Bering Sea probably.
Right.
So it was high risk, high adventure. I loved it. We were surrounded by birds and whales all the time, and doing interesting geology, long days. It turned out that one of the researchers had to go back for another summer and asked me if I would go back with him. So it was just the two of us out there in like wild Alaska,
Yeah.
right? So I went back for that second summer, and I think that really kind of honed my passion for geology, for remote field work, tapped into a sense of adventure that I have. And what a great opportunity for a young undergrad, right?
Well, just a crazy transition from like city girl LA, didn't go camping, didn't sound like you were super outdoorsy, and then to go, I mean, this is the other end of the spectrum, like Alaska, no trails, bushwhacking, big animals in the forest, and just like full on like wilderness experience.
Yeah, sleeping on a beach, in a like tiny little tent.
Yeah.
This was kind of before Gore-Tex had really hit the market too. So I was
Right.
just like soggy wet all the time.
Yeah. Like, yeah, just gear wasn't quite up to snuff at that point.
No.
That's crazy. Wow.
So I graduated from UC Santa Cruz. Um, Unfortunately, at a really poor time in the market. The bottom had dropped out of the oil market. And in the Bay Area, all of the exploration geologists that worked for Arcos, Ohio, Texaco, Chevron, they were all let go. And so I was looking for a job at the same time they were. All of these really highly qualified people that had been trained by the best, oil companies in the world. And so it made it very challenging for me to find a job. I just went over to the US Geological Survey in Menlo Park and literally knocked on doors.
Yeah.
Um, and said, you know what, I'm a graduate. I've got this great field experience. I'd love to help you. And I heard a lot of comments like, well, we don't put women in the field, or can you cook,
Oh
or
my
no
gosh.
opportunities, right?
Wow.
So I finally found somebody who would hire me. And he did mapping on the western, coast of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. But he's told me, he's like, you'll never go out in the field working here. And I was like, okay, I can draft like at the old school drafting with like a lettering set and everything. So I was hired to do drafting. But as luck would have it, the next summer he had to go do some paleomag work on the coast.
Mm.
And after not trying to hire me for 2 months to do that, he finally gave in and took me out in the field.
What was
So
your, if I can interrupt real quick, what was your, like, when you were getting these doors kind of slammed in your face, like what was your sort of disposition? Was it kind of defeatist and like taking the wind out of your sails, or did it just increase your resolve to like push against this manufactured like wall that was in front of you? What was your mindset?
yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, because I've been through this so many times, I am just a really determined woman. And so I'm like, yeah, you won't hire me. I know I can do this, but someone will.
Right.
And so I just kept at it. And even when someone said, I'll hire you, but you won't do field work, I was like, you'll change your mind.
Yeah. Like you just, I mean, where do you think that inner confidence comes from? Is that just something you've always had, you think? And like, is it something you had, like, did you do sports in high school or something that like gave you this kind of confidence in yourself, or that's just Darlene DNA coming through?
I think it might just be Darlene DNA,
Okay.
actually.
Well, what a great
For
asset.
better or worse, right? I mean, it's a great asset.
Yeah.
Not everyone might think so, but it's been a great asset.
Yeah, I mean, it can
Yeah.
get you in trouble for sure, but I think in general, like this is, something I don't see much largely in college age kids today. Largely, this is totally stereotyping the thing, but like the persistence, the like one door closes and I'm going to knock on another one. And like, just, it sounds like you were just rallying. You knew you could do the work. You wanted the experiences and you're like, I'm just going to keep going door to door until it happens.
Someone will eventually say yes. Also, I needed a job.
Right.
So
Got to pay bills, right?
yeah, also I
Wow.
needed a job. But yeah, I think I've always had that determination, and looking back, that has been kind of a guiding force for me. And maybe that is something that's unique to me, but I would just, for our listeners out there, if you believe in yourself, you can really do amazing things and create an incredible future.
Right.
You need to believe in yourself, right?
Yeah, great message for sure for anyone. Yeah, just you got to just keep going, keep grinding. It'll happen.
Yeah.
So you got this other, so he relented. You go out and do another stint of field work, which wasn't for women at the time, but you
So,
broke down that
yeah.
wall a little bit.
Yep, broke down that wall and then actually changed roles at the U.S. Geological Survey and went to work for Western Minerals, which at the time was mapping proposed wilderness study areas. So lots of opportunity for field work there. I worked for a guy named Mike Diggles, who was a great mentor for me and had no problem, putting me out in the field. And so we worked in the Reveille Range in Nevada. We worked in the Southern Sierra Nevada in proposed wilderness study areas, and then did a fun project in an area called the Skedaddle Mountains. Up by outside of Susanville, which was adjacent to another project called the Black Rock Playa. And I was thinking at the time, I don't know why this is a proposed wilderness study area. No one will ever come here. But that turned out to be a future Burning Man location.
Yes, right. So. If I would have told you back then, you know what, in the future, tens of thousands of people will descend on this, godforsaken playa and like revel for days on end, you'd have thought I was crazy.
Right. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
So then I was on these rotating 180-day appointments at the USGS. And so after about 3 years, I finally, was looking for a permanent job with them. And so, sorry, my phone was muted. I don't know why it's ringing. I finally left. They couldn't put me on permanently. And so actually went on an international trip to Tibet and traveled all the way across China on trains, went into
By
Tibet.
Yourself?
No, I was with one other person, and we were supposed to meet 2 other people. And we did, although it was complicated to do that. This was, again, before cell phones and satellite photos. Right. And you don't have a dot on a Google Maps to tell you where you are.
Yeah.
Kind of connecting with this opportunity for high adventure when we were in kind of a really remote part of Tibet, trying to decide which way to go. There had been a landslide at the border between Tibet and Nepal. We had the opportunity to hike over the Himalayas with a small group of traders. And so rather than kind of go around through an area on the official road and border where there had been a big landslide, we just took off over the Himalayas with this small group of people and wound up hiking over about a not quite 20,000 foot pass called Nang Pala.
Wow.
Up through incredible glacial terrain. This was the first time that I had been in massive, global scale glaciers.
Yeah,
right?
Alpine environment, right?
Really alpine. I mean, these are big mountains. We were off the shoulder of a peak called Shoyu. And so that wound up being about a 23-day hike to get back to civilization on the Nepal side. Sorry, I'm going to mute for a second. It's garbage truck day here.
I could barely hear it. That's fine.
Good. So yeah, again, being really comfortable in remote situations with kind of a plan, but it's not like we had days or weeks to think this through and plan that expedition. It just kind of organically happened, and we said yes to that opportunity. We were safe, but that's a big pivot to do a trip like that in the middle of a kind of unplanned thing. But great geology up there. It also made me appreciate my home mountains, the Sierra Nevada. They're equally spectacular and interesting and have a lot to offer from a scenery, a geologic, and an adventure standpoint. So, yeah.
Interesting. So how did maybe kind of give us the quick, so you haven't started a full-time career yet. You had the little stint with the USGS. You went on this kind of little adventure, and then, I know enough about your background to know kind of what's coming next. So maybe talk us through the next few years there.
So I actually wound up spending about 3.5 years at the US Geological Survey. After I came back from Tibet, I was helping my parents with something, so I moved back in with them in Pasadena for a little while and got a job at an engineering, geology, and geotechnical company called Geosoils in Van Nuys, California. And I wound up spending about a year and a half with them. They originally also hired me as a draftsperson. They were like, "We don't put women out in the field," and I was like, "Uh-huh, I've heard that before."
Wow.
Um, but 3 months in, one day they needed somebody to take a bag of cement out to a guy who was drilling a monitoring well or something. And I was the only person around that could do it. And the geologist drilling was like, "Hey, I'm going to go get some lunch. Here's how you log a borehole," and left. And, I just finished the day out with the drillers. And when I came back in, they were like, "We're going to put you in the field next week too." And so I had some great education there. I learned how to do fault investigation studies. This was in California with the Alquist Priolo special study areas for faulting. And so I learned all of those protocols, and that's going to, come around and help me when I apply for the county geologist role, right? And
Right.
California really had their engineering, geology reporting, investigation and reporting structure set up very well. So I spent about a year and a half with Geosoils, and then realized that I really needed to go to grad school. I was missing some key parts of understanding geology, mostly the three-dimensional type of thinking and modeling that you have to do when you're practicing, geology. You're drilling subsurface investigations, you have outcrops. I felt like my mapping skills could be improved even after all those years working for the USGS. And so I wound up going to school at Idaho State University, right up the road from where you are, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I had some
Why
friends.
Idaho State? What pulled you out of all the schools in California and you end up going to Pocatello?
Right. Well, again, really a coincidence. I went to a wedding and ran into some friends who I'd known from the Bay Area. They were both Stanford PhD students, and they had both gotten teaching jobs at Idaho State.
Hmm.
And so when I was telling them I wanted to go to grad school, they were like, "Well, we've got money. You should come check it out." And so they flew me up there. They put me in a little plane and flew me around the Boulder Mountains and said,
Yeah.
"How would you like to work here?" And I said, "Well, I think I would love that."
Wow.
So I wound up going to school at Idaho State and doing an incredible backcountry master's thesis in an area that had complex geology, right? It's, you know, pen perm rocks. They're in the upper plate of a core complex. They had been folded, during severe organic stuff. Then, all this, backsliding on the upper plate of a core complex. They had been intruded by volcanics. So half the stratigraphy was so hydrothermally altered, it was really hard to tell where you were in your section. So you
Mm-hmm.
had to be very thorough with both your stratigraphy as well as sort of unraveling all of the structural geology.
Yeah. So
I couldn't
complicated.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, really complicated. And I couldn't have asked for a better thesis to really hone those field skills about being able to unravel a complicated geologic history, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So big kind of formative experience for you was like going back. I mean, great self awareness by you. A lot of people in your position would have been like, I got my degree. I'm getting places with my career. I'm like, I'm moving up the ladder. They're sending me out in the field. And they might have just hunkered down and said, this is it. This is my little niche and I'm gonna carve out. But you had the awareness to see, hey, I have some holes. Like I could be better. There's some things I don't know. And then
Right.
and then went back to school in your late 20s or mid 20s or something like that to do that. That's not common.
Yeah, I think I was 28. And because I had worked for, I think by then a total of 5 years or something, I think it helped me be a better graduate student, right? I was more advanced than people who'd gone straight through from their undergrad
Yeah.
into grad school. That work experience had helped me manage my thesis and know, how theses can be, right? It's hard to know when you're done, right?
Is this enough? Yeah. Am I good now? Yeah.
Right, and manage your time. And also, mapping is a really unique animal in geology, right? I think Stephen Kirby covered some of this when you interviewed him. There are things that, it's really hard to say, wow, I've got this area 100% figured out. There's always something that's kind of tricky and that you can't fully explain about
Right.
it. And I think you have to know when to that's a key to something really important and when you just need to keep walking.
Yeah.
Right. And so finding that balance, I think was really key. So wonderful experience. Having a master's degree really did elevate not only my understanding of geology, but my ability to tackle and solve a problem and to be self-managed in doing that. So I think that master's degrees or PhDs, if that's what students choose to do, can be really instructive from a lot of different angles.
Right. And did you, as you were finishing up at Pocatello, was there a goal you had in terms of like, okay, I have my master's degree, now I'm going for this position or this career path? Or was it just, okay, or were you more like internal, like, hey, I've rounded out some skill sets here and now I'm ready for whatever comes? Did you have like a direction?
No, I didn't have a clear direction. And in fact, as I was wrapping up my master's, there were a couple of different possibilities for me to choose from. ISU had actually invited me to stay as kind of a lecturer for a season or two. I actually wound up doing a summer field stint with the Idaho Geological Survey to work on the Elk City 2-degree sheet along the Clearwater River. So I did that for the summer. But I also had a potential opportunity. By now, environmental consulting, site investigation, and remediation had become a really open career path for geoscientists. And I had an opportunity to go to the Bay Area and work for a major company to do that kind of work. And I decided that after being in grad school, it was time to make some money, right?
Right,
We all
yeah.
get there as
Yes.
students.
Yes.
And I also had an opportunity to go work with a professor on a PhD, right? And so my choice was to go back into industry and learn some more about this environmental work, and also go back to the Bay Area and make some money again. I managed to do all of my undergrad and graduate work without incurring any student loans.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Hard to
thanks.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, hard to do. I live really frugally. Um, so I went back to the Bay Area to work for this environmental company. And the project that they had assigned me to work on was just waiting for like a huge contract mod. They did a lot of work for Department of Defense sites. And in the meantime, they were just kind of sending me wherever. And in the meantime, I was also stuck in traffic a lot in the Bay Area. And after living in Idaho, doing a master's thesis in the wide open spaces where I had a lot of elbow room and 4 seasons, I decided that maybe the Bay Area wasn't for me. And especially it was at a time when housing in the Bay Area was very expensive. I didn't see a way to really have the quality of life that I wanted. And so the company that I was working for, and you know this company because you worked for them too, offered to transfer me to Salt Lake City. That was in 1992. And I said yes. And so they moved me to Salt Lake. And I worked here for that company for another 6 years. In between, though, a project in Guam came up, and my then husband and I decided to take the opportunity to move to Guam and run this big groundwater program at an Air Force base out there, where they were having some impacts from a chemical release that was starting to impact the island's water supply. And there was also another project to do environmental baseline surveys at a 5,000 acre parcel that the Department of Defense wanted to transfer back to the government of Guam. So we moved out to Guam for a year, and this was doing groundwater work in really deep wells, 300 to 500-foot wells in karst, right? It's modern limestone.
Yeah.
Guam is a reef environment with volcanics. And so really unique drilling opportunity. At the previous time I'd worked in, Alaska, in alluvial basin aquifers, a little bit out in North Dakota, but to work in these big modern limestone environments was really challenging and kind of a whole new environment. So super interesting geologically. So, and I did a lot of scuba diving also that year. Lived in Guam. That
I'm
was
just
pretty
impressed with how many, I mean, you bounced around a lot, had a lot of different experiences. We're not even all the way through the story yet, but like, it's like,
No,
whoa.
not quite. So ran into some issues with that company because I just couldn't seem to get promoted. I'm very good at project management, good at geology. They were promoting other people, mostly guys, all guys actually. And after a couple of years and really talking to the office manager about why I wasn't moving up, I kind of gave them 6 months to promote me. And when they didn't, I resigned.
Mm.
And so, and I had, my husband and I had really talked about this. He actually wound up leaving that company as well and starting his own groundwater consulting company. I went up to Juneau and worked for the Juneau Ice Fields Research Program for a summer, and then came back, and the county was hiring a new county geologist. And it was really all about hazards management in Salt Lake County. And so I applied for that job and was hired as the Salt Lake County Geologist. This was a program that was sponsored by the U.S. Geological Survey's National Hazards Earthquake Reduction Program, or NEHRP. And it was really to help counties that were really, really growing manage natural hazards. And at the time, Salt Lake County was really bursting at the seams, and development was going headlong into some areas that had higher risk from geologic hazards, not just along the Wasatch Fault, although that was paramount, but areas with rockfall, with debris flow, some areas with landslide as well. So when I started that role, it quickly became apparent that the standard of practice, what I was used to seeing for how consultants did these reports, and the amount of the depth of investigation that they did, the standard of care, if you will, was really not where it needed to be to protect themselves as consultants, to protect their clients as developers, and to protect homeowners that might be, buying and moving into these
Right.
properties. And some of these reports were being done by people who didn't really seem to have the right qualifications to do that. So how do you tackle a problem like that, right? And there were a lot of conversations with consultants themselves about that. Well, developers don't want to pay to do the full scope of work. So we needed to raise the bar on the standard of practice here. And we did that two different ways. I wrote a natural hazards zoning ordinance that established what needed to be included in a site investigation report for developers. And we made maps of special study areas in Salt Lake County where those studies would be done. So developers had some certainty if they were going to pick up a piece of project here, a project in a certain location, that a study would or wouldn't need to be done. The second thing, and I worked with the consultants and the development community to vet this approach. What developers are looking for are certainty. They don't mind doing the studies. They mind after they've already bought a piece of property.
Yeah, they don't want the lawsuits that come when the house slides down the hill. And had that happened yet in the Salt Lake County area? Were there like precedents already kind of set?
Yeah, there were. Yeah, so getting this ordinance in place was important, but it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the development community and without the support of the consultants. So this is where I really learned that stakeholder engagement is so important. If you're going to tackle something, go out and canvass your stakeholders and hear from them what their concerns are and how what we're doing can actually help them, because they turned out to be some of our strongest supporters. So we were able to implement a zoning ordinance in Salt Lake County that regulated what developers did and regulated how thorough consultants were about those investigations. The second thing that we did was I worked with a team of people here to push licensure for professional geologists through the state. Something that had been talked about for a while and needed a champion. And as somebody in a public-facing role, in a regulatory role, I had the receipts about why having professional licensure in Utah would be protective of the public, but not get in the way of development, right? And so we worked with, again, a small association of geoscientists here, had a lobbyist, talked to the engineering community, and we were able within a couple years to push through the professional licensure rule here in Utah, which I think is a really big step forward.
There wasn't any licensing in Utah prior to that? Like all the consultants and everything, it was just unregulated, at least when it comes to licensing? Wow.
There was the professional engineer's license, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what licensure does is it requires that if you're going to do a study, that you have the expertise to do that study. It requires that you practice within your area of expertise, whether you're a geologist or an engineer, that you practice within your area of expertise.
Right.
So for consultants that were doing fault studies, if they didn't have training to do fault trench investigations over active faults, they really shouldn't be writing those reports, right?
Yeah.
Same with landslide or debris flow studies, right? And so it leveled the playing field and set the bar for consultants. And I think it's worked really, really
Which
well.
protects the public, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, right? It's no
Yeah.
different than, my whoever cuts my hair at the local barber shop is a licensed, barber or cosmetologist or whatever. Like, licensing is just for those careers and trades that affect the general public, where negligence or incompetence on their part could be bad on some level, could affect people.
Right. And, Utah's not a state that likes unnecessary regulation and governance, right?
Right.
So we had to be really sure that we had, the right pitch, if you will, about why this was important enough that we should have a rule about it at the state. And it was really down to developers, again, need to know which consultants they should be able to hire to do a study like this. It put consultants on notice that, you shouldn't be taking this work if you don't have that level of expertise. And it gave owners, a sense of, if I did hire this person and it turns out they're not really experienced, they had a board that they could go to say, I've been, you know, I've this consultant, it shouldn't be practicing,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's disciplinary side of that, which really
Like an appeal
very,
process. Yeah.
very rarely has to be used. And the last thing I did at Salt Lake County that I'm super proud of was we had a piece of ground over at the bottom of Little Cottonwood Canyon that was supposed to be a fire station, and it's really close to the fault. And so rather than build a fire station there, we built a geologic park. It's got an amazing view of the U-shaped canyon for Little Cottonwood Canyon. I was tasked with getting this done and was given an amazing landscape architect with Salt Lake County Parks and Rec. The community was super engaged about this. And so we were able to build the G.K. Gilbert Geologic View Park with
Salt Lake's
interpretive science.
first, right? Like the first geologic park, maybe in the States at that time. I don't know, but at least in that area.
Yeah, and it's just, it's a great place. I know that field camps stop there all the time. There's a number of field trips that go through there. The Utah Geological Survey and the Utah Geological Association work together on the signage for the park. So there's great interpretive signage there. If you're coming through Salt Lake, I really, encourage you to stop and go there. It's just, there's a lot to see right from that small park. So that was one of my legacy gifts to Salt Lake County that I feel really great about.
No, and I've used it for my field trips too. It is a fantastic location and just a great use of just a small area. It's not like a very huge area, but great views. There's a lot you can see from there, and the interpretation there really helps people learn kind of what they're seeing in the landscape in front of them. That's great.
It does. Yeah. And I got to name the park. And so, I really wanted to name it after G.K. Gilbert. He's one of my heroes of geology. And
very appropriate.
Yeah,
especially in the Salt Lake area. I mean, he was the original geologist of many that came through the area, but that really, figured out the Bonneville shorelines and just, did a lot of that groundbreaking work at the early levels.
I'm really impressed by his ability to infer, shorelines versus fault scarps, that the fault was active, to work out the Bonneville story. He was a master of understanding how geography, really represented dynamic geological environments. He was a great writer. His monograph is an incredible piece of work.
Yep.
So yeah, I have a little bit of, nostalgia for the time that G.K. Gilbert could come into those types of things. I had a change in management at Salt Lake County, and that turned out to be, again, a running theme in my career, not so great. And it was kind of a roadblock for me, and wound up leaving Salt Lake County. And my son was younger at that time. It seemed like a great opportunity to run my own consulting business. So for about 7 years, I ran a company called Mountain Land Development Services, and I walked projects through zoning. I was really familiar with the whole zoning process. Zoning can be a permitting black hole for a lot of projects. They go into zoning and can take years to come out. And I'm really good at streamlining and expediting the process. I worked for ski resorts. We built a hotel. I worked on a bunch of cabin properties, did some subdivisions, and at the same time was also doing some hazards reports for some other consultants. So still connected with the hazards industry as well.
Mm-hmm.
Here comes the garbage truck.
Back down the hill.
So, and then completely unforeseen, about 7, 8 years into running my consulting business, a small consulting company here in Utah that I'd known forever, I'd actually done some consulting work for them, was acquired by a larger national company. And for some reason, the local office here decided to hire a business development professional. And for some reason, they thought that person should be me. So they called me up and they were like, hey, we think you should come do business development for us. And I was like, well, I don't really know what that is.
Right.
And I'm busy.
Yeah. Not my skill set. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't really know what business development is. They were really interested in my connections, right? Because by this time I'd worked with developers and consultants. And I was like, my projects kind of wind up in 3 or 4 months. If you're still looking for somebody, call me. And they were like, well, we'll just wait and we'll call you in 3 months.
They wanted
and they
you.
did.
Yeah.
They were very specific. To this day, it's a mystery to me why they thought this would be, why they thought I was the right person. But after running my own business, which didn't make tons of money, although great to have that flexibility when my son was young. The pay, the ability to contribute to 401k, to work with a national company that is really good at what they do, and to work with a team of people that I knew, and these people were friends of mine, right?
Yeah.
And so they reeled me in. My job was to kind of look at the overall market here in Utah. This was in the kind of the mid 2010s. Look at the overall market here in Utah and look at where they could direct their business development recruitment to start picking up more work. And they wanted to grow the office. The office here had about 35 or 40 people. So, I came in and looked at what the skill set was for this company and looked at this time, some really large projects were coming to Utah, like 1 million square feet of Amazon distribution,
Right.
1 million square foot UPS facility, 1 million square foot of, you name it, right?
Yeah. Silicon slopes and everything. Yeah.
Silicon slopes and everything. We started to joke that people didn't build anything less than 1 million square feet anymore, right? And so I wrote a strategic plan for business development, kind of modeled off of something somebody else had used, and we began to implement it. And I really, one of the issues was they just weren't really known in this market. The old company was, the new company name wasn't. It was branding recognition. So I just kind of went out and really pushed their brand out there. I showed up at a lot of associations, used my network, built off of some other associations that are here where there's, connections with engineering companies, connections with construction companies, connections with architects, and really, just built work. And we were incredibly successful. This was supposed to be a 5-year strategic plan, and within 3 or 4 years, we had doubled the size of the office.
Wow.
By the time I left, we had tripled the size of the office. I think when I left, we had about 105 people, and I think had tripled the revenue at that office. And I really credit this company for supporting, not only my efforts, by green lighting a lot of it, but giving us a lot of corporate support and giving me incredible training. I had counterparts throughout the Intermountain West. We all went through COVID together. We talked a lot. We shared clients. It was very open. There was a lot of expertise that I benefited from. There was a lot of people who benefited from my expertise as well. So a really, really great experience. And, at working at that level as senior client development manager for this company, I really was in a very high level of leadership in this office, this local office, which put me in a business administration and management role. And that expertise would become really important when I went on to apply, to be part of the Geological Survey's leadership team. So, kind of same thing, right? I had a change in management after about 8 years at this company. And at this point, I've seen this movie
Right.
and I don't really like it. So I pretty quickly just kind of pushed this issue to the finish line. At this point, I'm pretty senior in my career. I have the right to be treated, with respect, and for what I do and what I bring to the company to be appreciated. And I have some expectations about how people will be treated in that situation. And I also think that it is time for senior women to be seen and respected. And I think this company overall is great at that. I was just in the wrong situation.
Right.
So, exited this company, and it was a employee-owned company, so I had some stock options. And when I left, I just kind of looked at where I was in my life, and I had acquired a cabin that was a family cabin in the Sierras. And I thought, after 45 years of work and school, I'm going to take a sabbatical.
Yeah.
And so
You
I just
deserve
hit
it.
the pause. Thank you. I just hit the pause button and took what I call my senior gap year, not the senior gap year you take when you're a high school student, but the senior gap year you take when your hair looks like this. And Shawn, that's when I connected with you, was late in that year. And, your Iceland, all the work that you did, broadcasting about the Iceland eruptions, and just happened to see under one of your videos that you were running a trip to Iceland. And I thought, I want to do that. That year that I took off, I did everything I'd wanted to do for years. I, went scuba diving. I rode horses on the beach with a friend. I, took a couple of international trips, went to my cabin, spent a ton of time with my friends. It was a really refreshing. I sent myself to paddling school in
Yeah,
North
just
Carolina.
recharge your own batteries, right? Like
I did, yeah. And then I had stepped on to the state of Utah's professional geologist licensure board. We had had a board meeting, and the chair of the PG board was the state geologist, Bill Keach. And he was like, Darlene, stay on the call. I want to run something by you. And he said, my deputy director of the Utah Geological Survey is retiring, and I think you should apply for the job. And I was like, that's
You're like, I'm done working. Right.
No, I didn't think I was done working.
Okay.
And that's what I had kind of realized when I took this sabbatical is, for a lot of reasons, I wasn't quite done. I wasn't quite there financially, still pretty young. And I still felt like I had a lot to contribute to my field. I had worked really closely with the Utah Geological Survey when I was a Salt Lake County geologist. I could not have been successful in that job without a huge amount of collaboration with the excellent geologists at the hazards program at UGS. And I really thank them for being, right there by my side when, critical issues needed to be looked at or I needed advice. And I was familiar with people on their mapping team as well. And I thought, well, this is a really good organization, and that's a great opportunity. And Director Keach had also let me know that he was considering retiring in the next year or so. So I knew that there was a succession opportunity. And what I brought to the survey was a little bit different than, if they were going to bring somebody up from inside. One, they were looking for a bit of outside perspective. They were looking for someone who was strategic and had vision, right? and maybe some stronger business skills. And I brought all that plus a lot of geologic cred with me, right? Like I've been in the field.
Yeah.
I know
All your
where
expertise. Yeah.
yeah, mapping and environmental groundwater, some wetlands work. I have, done or helped manage all of that. And so, a couple interviews. And also, I thought it might give me a platform to do a couple things that are really important to me. Utah is expecting a very large earthquake anytime now, and we're not ready, right? And so, could I potentially use this leadership role at UGS to help advance that? They're a big survey. At the time that I came in, the Utah Geological Survey had about 95 people. That's a lot of people, right? And there were senior people with vast institutional knowledge retiring out of the survey, and younger people, stepping in that still needed that mentorship and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and So I was hired as the deputy director, and really tried to support Director Keach in his final year at the survey. Um, and then, he retired. And there was this opportunity to apply as the state geologist, which, if you had told me when I was 19 years old, driving a Zodiac boat around some islands in Alaska, or every time I had to leave a job because of, an unmanageable situation and go look for something else. If you had told me that all of this would lead to the opportunity to be a state geologist, I wouldn't have believed it. I have to say, after this long of a career, it was really amazing to have the opportunity to step into this role. And almost um, like I had a moment where I was filling out my application where I was like, did everything in my life really lead to this?
Mm-hmm. Kind of
And
surreal, right?
it was super profound. I don't believe in like destiny. So I don't know what to say about this, but I really did feel like everything I had ever done in my life, from my geologic expertise to this kind of ongoing accrual of management responsibility, running my own consulting business, helping grow a company, to a huge size, and the change management that needed to happen with that, right? My ability to be really strategic and visionary. Um, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply for this. And I didn't think the job was mine to lose, but I also felt like I was the best possible candidate for this. And so, but this was at a really challenging time, Shawn, because it was in April of
Last year.
this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
this year
This year. Yeah.
actually.
You're right. 2025. Yeah.
And yeah, and the Trump administration was going through websites like wiping out anything that even remotely referenced diversity, right? The Utah Geological Survey is part of the Utah Department of Natural Resources, a cabinet, level under the governor, group that has 12 agencies. Of those agencies, 5 of those agencies are led by women, right? We have an executive director who is really empowering. And so while I, think I have all the receipts for, am I the right person for this job? I wanted to make sure that there was no doubt in anybody's mind that if I was hired or appointed, it wasn't because I was a diversity hire.
Right.
So when I put my application together, I put everything in there.
Yeah. Just overwhelm
Uh,
them with just how qualified you are.
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is go sit in front of the legislature, right? This coming February, I have to present to the legislature and have them think that there was any question about whether I was qualified to lead this amazing organization.
Right.
So, but it was also nerve-wracking to put this application together, it was like this moment in my life where I was like picking up this crown or pulling the sword out of the stone or something, where you walk up to it and you're like, this is kind of the moment, right?
Yeah.
Um, I actually had a little bit of a moment where I had to go into a coworker's office and say, I need a pep talk about this. I couldn't hit submit on my application. And so I have a, great advisor in my group, and they gave me one of the best pep talks I've ever had. And they were like, we all are here to support you. This is your moment. Go get it.
Yeah.
And so I went back to my office and hit submit, and went through the interview process, and was offered the opportunity to lead the Utah Geological Survey as the 8th director, I believe, and the 2nd female director for the UGS.
Wow.
So,
Well, like, well deserved. And I mean, you and I texted this last spring when you were. It's interesting to me though, as you told that story, that you had, for as confident as you were throughout your whole life, from a 19-year-old girl on, that here at near the end of your career, that you had that like moment of self-doubt and hesitancy. You knew you were qualified, but you just were like, you just wanted it to be a slam dunk. It sounded like you wanted there to be no shred of doubt to
yes,
anyone.
that's
And yeah, I mean, I understand, it's totally understandable, but you were human for one moment, Darlene. That's great. Welcome to the club.
I was human for one moment. I think I had to leave that person's office because I thought I might cry, right? And then I went back and, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this, right? Let's do it. And, what an opportunity, right? I mean, I look back at my career and I've been so fortunate, right? I mean, have there been some, messy times where I'm like, this isn't going to work out. I need to make a change? Yes. Were those good for me? Absolutely. Did they lead me to learn something new and, create even more depth in my ability to help an organization? Absolutely.
Right.
And I credit every opportunity I've had. And sure, there were maybe guys who were, not so supportive of me, but wow, there were a lot of guys that said yes and gave me a big toolkit to work with.
Right.
And so I feel incredibly fortunate. And I run an amazing agency. So we have incredible scientists who are very, very good at what they do. They're led by a program management team that is also very, very good at what they do. We have an incredible mission at the Utah Geological Survey, and it's kind of our moment, right? Utah is faced with a lot of challenges in terms of our resources. There's a huge need for increased energy. There's a big focus on minerals and critical minerals, and we live in a extremely water challenged state. That is everything the survey does that we are good at.
Right.
And so we are raising our profile in terms of the foundational baseline science that we do to support good management decisions for resource development and deployment here in Utah.
Right.
And we talk about this a lot in our organization.
Do you feel like you have to, just talking to like, the average taxpayer in Utah or anyone, like, do you feel like it's a hard argument to justify the UGS's existence and budget and staffing needs and such, or do you feel like the community and the public in that state, the residents, are like, heck yeah, this is something we need? Is there a challenge there or not?
No, there's not. I think the Geological Survey is universally beloved by not only the sister agencies that we work with, but by the public. And we have a great team of educators and communicators that have done fantastic public outreach. Our websites are amazing in terms
Yes.
of how much information you can get from our websites. There is a whole team of people that develop those websites, that spend time talking about what the public needs from those websites and how to make it available.
Yeah.
So there's a big machine behind all of that. And it's an expensive machine, but they do a really good job, right?
Yeah. And I can speak for, and I'm biased because I'm, right there next to you in Idaho, and I went to a school in Utah, Weber State, and I lived in Utah for a while. But having looked at, a dozen or so state geological site websites, I'd have to say Utah's is one of the most user-friendly, informative. I can't tell you how many times I go into the interactive geologic map of the state, which allows you to zoom in, because I'm leading a field trip and I'm like, okay, like what exactly are the age of these limestones at this, stop along the freeway or whatever, and like boom, you can get that information. And so it really is, I think, a level above what you see with typical state surveys, which is really commendable.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to take that huge compliment back to the team that does that work.
Yeah,
So,
please do.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
they're really great at it.
yeah, no, I think it's great. Well, maybe to wrap up, Darlene, because you've given us a great overview of your career. I mean, I felt like I knew you, but now I just know like so much more, all the layers here, which is just incredible. Maybe talk a little bit about, and you've mentioned it a little bit as a theme. You've mentioned it as a management issue, and then you veered a little bit, but maybe speak more explicitly to just the challenges of navigating this discipline in your career with blatantly just putting it like just being a woman, like the monoculture you kind of faced early in your career, and maybe talk about what it was like then, what those challenges were, and then kind of where things are now, and like what expanding your career, what you see as the differences.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in a way it's just a sign of the times, right? As a student at UC Santa Cruz in the 80s, kind of getting that pushback from my peer group about that fieldwork in Alaska, I was a little surprised by that. I guess I grew up in a family and in a, school situation that empowered me, and I didn't really see gender differences. And let's face it, the 80s were not the 50s, right?
Yeah.
And so I was a little surprised to see that in the 80s from my cohort. And I was like, this isn't right. That kind of conversation doesn't belong here, and it's not going to impact me. And I just kind of ignored it. Um, and, it didn't create self-doubt in my mind. Same kind of conversation going into the workplace. I think the timing of my growth and career was really just this kind of holdover. And unfortunately, that peer group traveled with me through the maturing of my career, right?
Yeah.
Um, every time I worked for a company that said we don't hire women, and then they wound up hiring me and putting me out on the field, they would hire 3 more women right behind me because they're like, oh, yeah, duh, of course these people can perform, right? And so, I was literally opening the door for women to come in behind me
Yeah,
at
it's a
organization
huge credit to
after
you.
organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Well, thank you.
trailblazer.
Yeah. I mean, I had to crash through a lot of glass ceilings. I have scars all over my body from doing it, but we're good, right? Scars all over my psyche from breaking through glass ceilings. So I have seen the tremendous growth of younger women in our field. And I think, their cohort and the mentorship that they receive from women like me and others has really helped them rapidly evolve and be successful, right? But it did kind of stalk me through my career. And I think I am a super confident, intelligent woman. And I think there are just some guys, not very many, who are challenged by that, right?
Yeah.
And from time to time, I mean, I would come into companies with amazing managers who would open doors for me and, let me do my thing, and we're all thriving from that. But boy, you have a change in manager, and it's like, what's she doing here? And,
Yeah.
there's conflict, and I don't feel that's appropriate. And if I cannot resolve it inside my organization, maybe it's time for me to go do something else where I can contribute, right? Without that kind of friction, because it's stressful and it doesn't belong in the workplace.
Yeah.
So,
Well, then it
so I
never
think,
slowed you down. Like you're like, fine. Like I tried to resolve this, and when you can't make any headway with that person, you just switched gears. You zagged and you found something else. And
yeah, because there are always doors that will open. And
right.
that's something where I'm just very trusting is, what, if this door is closing, if we cannot resolve this situation and nobody's happy, right, then maybe it's time to look for the next door that'll open. And Shawn, without fail, not only have doors opened for me, but they have been doors that led to amazing opportunities, incredible opportunities where I have been able to grow, and I've been able to help other organizations do what they needed to get done, in ways that have just been incredibly productive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, have I had to pivot? Yes. Have those been, a bad thing? No, I don't
Yeah.
think so. And so in terms of, sharing that sometimes, sometimes making a change is really the best thing. And I know some people are really change adverse, and I kind of thrive with with the opportunities for where change will take us.
No, I think that, I mean, your perspective is just so refreshing because so many people would be bitter. I mean, I can't put myself in your shoes. I'm a white male, like, like I didn't live that life, but I imagine like just getting shut down all those times, it would be easy to like, either completely change, just whatever, something dramatic but your ability to just kind of like see one door closing, like you said, as an opportunity, and then look where that's got you. And so the fact that you're where you're at and you still see it very positively, you don't look back, I think, on any of these moments with any degree of like vindictiveness or, it is kind of like, it is what it is. I can't change it. All I can do is move forward. And I think that's just such a great mindset to have.
Right. Yeah, I'm not the kind of person that drags a lot of baggage along with me, right? Like we all did the best that we could in those circumstances. And, I changed a lot of hearts and minds about whether women could do field work, whether women belong in this position, right? Whether women can and should, show up in these situations. I think I did change a lot of hearts and minds. There were a few I couldn't change.
Right.
And so that's just where it's at, right? I'm not going to carry vindictiveness or anything along with me. We're all doing the best that we can,
Yeah.
right? And so that doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve the person that, I was in this situation with, or my future organizations to drag along, any kind of bitterness about that. I don't show up with a chip on my shoulder about these situations. Has it been frustrating? Sure. Should it have happened? Should it have happened? No. But at the same time, let's move on and go make a difference in the world some other way.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I think it's a perfect way to end our discussion today. Just your glass is half full optimism is great, and just the wealth of experiences you've had. And it's just been so fun getting to know you the last few years and see you kind of arrive at this moment where you're just kind of thriving. And I just, I know the survey's in good hands. I know you're going to do great things. And it's just fun to be like, tell all my geology friends like, oh yeah, I know the state geologist of Utah. Yeah, I took her on a trip to Iceland, so cool. So, thanks so much, Darlene, for your time today. You were a wonderful guest, inspiring on so many levels, and we just wish you well. Thank you.
Thanks, Shawn. I tell all my friends that I know Shawn Willsey, right?
I don't know if that's as impressive, the talking head on the screen or the lady that's standing in front of the legislature, but I'll take it.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been a great.
Yeah. Thanks, Darlene. Fun talking to you.